ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जायमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिके। ॐ ज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. Reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We are reading from Canto 3, Chapter 6, Creation of the Universal Form. So currently we are in the first section of this chapter, where development of the gigantic universal form is taking place, and we are at text 10. So to be aware, we are in the section of Sarga and Visarga. Sarga happens at the beginning of the creation, that is beginning of Brahma's life, and this is called as the primary creation. So the Sarga part of the section of Bhagavatam is also covered in Canto 2 and Canto 3. In Canto 2, we have seen the question by Parikshit Maharaj, 2.4.6, and in the answer to this question, Shukdev Goswami narrates conversation between Lord Brahma and Narad Muni. So this is Sarga. What is Visarga? Visarga is beginning of Brahma's day. So Sarga is like, creation in the primary creation where the raw materials are made available, and Visarga where the building is going to come up when the raw materials are already in place. So this is the difference between Sarga and Visarga. And the different expansions of the Lord that we are going to see here, Mahavishnu we have seen, Hiraṇmaya, Garbhodakshayi Vishnu we have seen. These are more clearly explained in Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Lord Krishna expands as Lord Balaram. Lord Balaramji expands as the Chaturvyuha expansion. Vasudev Sankarshan Pradyumna Aniruddha. This Vespa is called as the Mula Sankarshan. And from the Sankarshan comes Lord Narayana. And then from Narayana comes the second Chaturvyuha, that is second Vasudev Sankarshan Pradyumna Aniruddha. This is called as Mahasankarshan. And from Mahasankarshan there is Mahavishnu and Sadashiv. And then from Mahavishnu there is Garbhodakshayi Vishnu. From Garbhodakshayi Vishnu there is Kshirodakshayi Vishnu. And from Kshirodakshayi Vishnu there is Paramatma, who is in the core of all of our hearts, right? So this is how these beautiful expansions are explained, not in Bhagavatam, but in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And that's why Chaitanya Charitamrita is considered as the advanced study of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So we now come to text 10. Smaran Visvasrijamisho Vidnyapitam Adhokshajah Virajam Apatat Svena Tejasaisham Vivrittaye. Translation.
The Supreme Lord is the Supersoul of all the demigods entrusted with the task of constructing the cosmic manifestation. Being thus prayed to by the demigods, he thought to himself and thus manifested the gigantic form of for their understanding. Purport. The impersonalists are captivated by the gigantic universal form of the Supreme. They think that the control behind this gigantic manifestation is imagination. Intelligent persons, however, can estimate the value of the cause by observing the wonders of the effects. For example, the individual human body does not develop from the womb of the mother independently, but because the living entity, the soul, is within the body. Without the living entity, a material body cannot automatically take shape or develop. When any material object displays development, it must be understood that there is a spiritual soul within the manifestation. The gigantic universe has developed gradually, just as the body of a child develops. The conception that the transcendence enters within the universe is therefore logical. As the materialist cannot find the soul and the supersoul within the heart, similarly, for want of sufficient knowledge, they cannot see that the supreme soul is the cause of the universe. The Lord is therefore described in the Vedic language as Avan Manasa Gocharha, beyond the conception of words and minds. Due to a poor fund of knowledge, the mental speculators try to bring the supreme within the purview of words and minds. But the Lord refuses to be so intelligible. The speculator has no adequate words or minds to gauge the infinity of the Lord. The Lord is called Adokshaja, or the person who is beyond perception by the blunt, limited potency of our senses. One cannot perceive the transcendental name or form of the Lord by mental speculation. The mundane PhDs are completely unable to speculate on the Supreme with their limited senses. Such attempts by the puffed up PhDs are compared to the philosophy of the frog in the well. A frog in a well was informed of the gigantic Pacific Ocean, and he began to puff himself up in order to understand or measure the length and breadth of the Pacific Ocean. Ultimately, the frog burst and died. The title PhD can also be interpreted as plow department, a title meant for the tillers in the paddy field. The attempt of the tillers in the paddy field to understand the cosmic manifestation and the cause behind such wonderful work can be compared to the endeavor of the frog in the well to calculate the measurement of the Pacific Ocean. The Lord can reveal himself only to a person who is submissive and who engages in his transcendental loving service. The demigods controlling the elements and ingredients of universal affairs prayed to the Lord for guidance, and thus he manifested his gigantic form, as he did at the request of Arjuna. Hare Krishna.
The Supreme Lord, who is the supersoul of all the demigods, entrusted this task of constructing cosmic manifestation. And when the elemental demigods prayed to the Lord, he manifested this gigantic universal form. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that impersonalists are captivated by the gigantic universal form. And they think, oh, such an amazing form. And what is the working principle behind this form? They have no clue. And they leave it to the imagination. Asatyam, apratishtamte, jagadahur, anishwaram. This is their imagination. But the intelligent person, Prabhupada says, can estimate the value of such cause by observing the wonders of the effect. Very amazing statement. Intelligent person can estimate value of the cause by observing wonders of the effect. For example, Prabhupada says, the human body is there and human body develops within the womb of the mother. But that will not develop just like that. Unless there is a soul, the living principle, the living entity around which the human body will develop. So, for the development of the human body, there has to be a living entity. Similarly, when any material object displays a great development, one has to understand that there is a spiritual soul within that manifestation. Just like, we may be watching on the television a huge, this orbiter is flying. So orbiter may be flying, orbiter may be coming back and, coming exactly at the position where the SpaceX has defined that orbiter should come back. So this material wonderful activity, but there has to be a spirit behind it. So one may end up appreciating the scientist, Elon Musk, so on and so forth, for such amazing activity. And therefore, Prabhupada says here, the value of the cause one can estimate by observing the wonders of the effect. So one may get swayed by the wonders of the effect, but behind those effects, there is a cause. Similarly, behind this cosmic, huge, gigantic manifestation, there is the cause. That cause is Mahavishnu, or the expansions of the Supreme Lord. Prabhupada says, similarly, just like child develops the body within the womb, similarly, the gigantic universe is also developed gradually. It was not suddenly manifested, all one through. No, it was gradually developed. Now, materialistic cannot really understand this. Prabhupada says, what to speak of understanding the universal form, the materialist, they cannot find the soul and supersoul within their own hearts. I mean, the closest thing is to them is the heart, and they themselves are the soul, and the supersoul is sitting next to them. But they cannot find the soul and supersoul within the heart. Then what to speak of finding the soul and supersoul within the cosmic manifestation? And therefore, the Supreme Lord is called as Avanimanasa Gocharaha. The Lord is beyond the conception of words and minds. But due to poor fund of knowledge, mental speculator try to bring the God under their purview of words and mind. So Lord is revealed, but because of arrogance, people want to forcefully understand the Supreme Lord. And Prabhupada says, but the Lord refuses to be so intelligible. Intelligible means to be forcefully understood by words and mind. Thus he remains adhokshajaha, one who is beyond the words and mind. Right. Srila Prabhupada says here that there are many mundane PhDs, and these PhDs are puffed up with their knowledge and put forward the different philosophies about the Lord, about the creation. But all these philosophies about the Lord and the creation, they are like the frog in the well. And by their own intelligence, if they want to find out the Supreme Lord, they will become more and more bewildered. And the super classic example of this is, the scientists had so many questions. So they had this Hubble's telescope was sent in the sky, and Hubble created so many questions that, it created more questions than the answers. And now they have this James Webb telescope in the sky. $10 billion are put up. And now the James Webb is sending such information that their minds and brains are completely freezed. That they are saying that the universe, the kind of universe it is. So Prabhupada says, just like there was a frog in the well, and once a friend from Pacific Ocean came, and the frog in the well wanted to understand the vastness of the Pacific Ocean by his own measurement. And therefore he began to say, hey, how big is your ocean? Is it 2 times of my well? And then he was swelling up, and swelling up, finally only to burst and die. So the Lord is not intelligible, but the Lord can be revealed by submission and when one is engaged in loving devotional service. This is known. Prabhupada says this may not be known to the modern scientist with their mundane PhDs, but this PhD can be translated as the plow department. They are like the tillers in the paddy field, trying to understand the vastness of the cosmos. This was known to the elemental demigods. And therefore, the elemental demigods, they prayed to the Supreme Lord for the guidance. And thus the Supreme Lord manifested the gigantic form as he had later manifested to Arjuna as well during Bhagavad Gita. Beautiful explanation by Srila Prabhupada. Now we enter the second section of this chapter, that is text 11 to 26, where there is manifestation of different demigods from the universal form. And here we will also see different demigods are being manifested, and different functions of the virāṭ-puruṣa, they are being manifested. So we will see that text 12, there is manifestation of mouth, demigod Agni and speech. Text 13, there is a manifestation of tongue and demigod Varuṇa. Next, there is manifestation of nostrils, Granendriya, and 2 Ashwini Kumaras. Text 15, there is manifestation of eyes and then sun god. Text 16, there is manifestation of skin, Charma, and demigod Anila. 17, manifestation of Shrotram, Karna, ears, and there is the controlling deity of the directions, Dikpala, entering the Karna of the virāṭ-puruṣa. Then there is Tvacha. Tvacha is the skin. And then there is demigods for who are in charge for sensation and the different parts entering into it. Then there is a maid drum, genitals, and Prajapati is taking charge of this. And there is Gudam, that is rectum, and there is Mitra Devata who takes charge of this. Manifestation of hands, then there is Indra Devata taking charge of this. Manifestation of Pada, legs, and the demigod named Vishnu. Now, he is not the supreme personality of Godhead, he is a demigod named Vishnu. He is taking charge of this. And then there is a Buddhi, intelligence, Lord Brahma taking charge of this. And then there is Hasta, Hridayam, heart, Chandra Devata taking care of this. And then there is false ego, Rudra Devata taking care of, in charge of this. And then finally there is consciousness, Sattvam, and the living entity is in charge of this. So this is how this section from text 11 to 26, manifestation of different demigods from the universal form. So we come to text 11. Asatasya katidha yatananiha nirabhidyantya devanam tani me gadata shrunu. Translation.
Maitreya said, "You may not hear from me how the Supreme Lord separated himself into diverse forms of the demigods after the manifestation of the gigantic universal form, purport. The demigods are separated parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, as are all other living entities. The only difference between the demigods and the ordinary living entities is that when the living entities are rich in pious acts of devotional service to the Lord, and when their desire to lord it over material energy has vanished, they are promoted to the posts of the demigods, who are entrusted by the Lord with executing the management of the universal affairs."
So Maitreya said, now hear how the diverse forms of the demigods are manifested. Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport that demigods are vibhinnamsha, just like the living entities. And these are very specialized living entities. What is their speciality? The first is they are very rich in the pious activities of devotional service, and their desire to lord it over the material nature is almost vanished. Sometimes they also have a desire, like Indra exhibiting so many desires we see time to time, but almost there it is like they are much purified. In the previous purport, Srila Prabhupada explained that among the many prisoners, there are seasoned prisoners who have realized the importance of following the rules, and therefore the seasoned prisoners are given different administrative posts within the prison, that you distribute clothes, you distribute food, you distribute some another section. So similarly, the demigods are also living entities. They are vibhinnamsha, but they are rich in the pious devotional activities and have realized the ultimate goal of the life to great extent. And thus they are promoted to this administrative post of demigods. Text 12. Tasyagnirasyam nirbhinnam lokapalo vishatpadam vacha swamshena vaktavyam yayasau pratipadyate. Translation.
Agni, or heat, separated from his mouth, and all the directors of material affairs entered into it in their respective positions. By that energy, the living entity expresses himself in words. Purport: the mouth of the gigantic universal form of the Lord is the source of the speaking power. The director of the fire element is the controlling deity, or the Adideva. The speeches delivered are adhyatma, or bodily functions, and the subject matter of the speeches is material production, or the Adibhuta principle. Hare Krishna.
Now there is manifestation of Agni, or heat, separated from the mouth. Prabhupada says the mouth of the gigantic universal form is the source of the speaking power. And the director of this heat element, fire element, is the controlling deity. Now here we are going to see there is Adhidaiva, Adhyatma, and Adibhuta. Right. So this reference to the previous verse, Ekadha Dashavit Tridha. So Ekadha is the Jiva, living entity, which will come at the end. Dashavid, they are the 10 prana, 10 different types of airs. And Trivid. So here now, everywhere, every manifestation, we will see Adidaiva, Adhyatma, and Adibhuta. Right. So here is the mouth is manifested of the gigantic universal form. Controlling deity is Agni, and living entity expresses himself through words or speech is the activity. So mouth, Agni, speech. Text 13. Nirbhinnam talu varuno lokapalo vishadharehe jigdhanshena charasam yayasau pratipadyate. Translation.
When the palette of the gigantic form was separately manifested, Varuṇa, the director of water in the planetary systems, entered therein, and thus the living entity has the facility to test everything with his tongue.
Now there is manifestation of the tongue or the palate, and the controlling deity is the Varuṇa, who is the director of the air in the planetary systems, entered therein, and it has provided a facility to taste everything with the tongue. Okay, so first is the speech, now there is the taste with the tongue. Text 14. Nirbhinne ashvinau nase vishnura upavishatam padam granenanshena gandhasya pratipattir yato bhavet. Translation.
When the
Lord's
Lord's
two
two
nostrils
nostrils separately manifested themselves, the 12 Ashwini Kumaras entered them in their proper positions, and because of this, the living entities can smell the aromas of everything.
Then there is a manifestation of Granendriya, the two nostrils of the virāṭ-puruṣa. And they were taken charge by the Ashwini Kumaras, the two Ashwini Kumaras. And the purpose or the activity there is smell the aromas of everything. Smelling the aromas, the sense of smell is manifested and controlled by Ashwini Kumaras, which are the Granendriya of virāṭ-puruṣa. Text 15. Nirbhinne akshini tvashta lokapalo vishadvibho chakshuṣansena rūpānam prapattir yato bhavet. Translation.
Thereafter, the two eyes of the gigantic form of the Lord were separately manifested. The sun, the director of light, entered them with the partial representation of eyesight, and thus the living entities can have vision of forms.
Then there is manifestation of two eyes of the gigantic universal form, Nirbhinne Akshini Tvashta. And the controlling deity is the sun god, director of the light, and thus visions of the forms. The living entity can have visions of the various forms. So what it also means is later it will come in the 10th canto, where the demigods, they say, whenever the living entity used to take darshan of the Supreme Lord, so there are three things. When we see something, there is an object that we see, then there is a upakarana that we see through, that are the eyes. Then there is a upakarana devata, the sense of seeing. Okay, so these eyes are controlled by the sun god. Therefore you will have this, somebody having a problem with the eyesight, or chashme ka bahut bada number hai, then they are advised to recite this Chakshusha Upanishad, which is a prayer to sun god, right? So this is very, very systematic. And these devatas are saying, whenever living entity, even the Vrajavasis used to take darshan of the Supreme Lord, we used to enjoy the darshan of the Supreme Lord through their eyes. So whenever we are using our senses, they are used under the permission of the demigods. Therefore, the senses cannot be simply misused, because the demigods are controlling the senses and giving the permission positively or reluctantly, because there is a free will of the living entity, but the demigods are also there, right? So they are the controlling deity. So they are the controlling deity of all the eyes, all the nostrils, all the tongue. So Varuṇa is controlling deity, all the mouth, Agni is the controlling deity, so on and so forth. Text 16. Nirbhinnanyasya charmani lokapalo nilo vishat pranenamshena samsparsham yena sau pratipadyate. Translation.
When there
When
was a
there was a
manifestation of
manifestation,
skin separated from the gigantic form, Anila, the deity directing the wind, entered with partial touch, and thus the living entities can realize tactile knowledge. Hare Krishna.
Yes. Then there is manifestation of the skin, charma. And then there is a demigod named Anila, who is the deity directing the wind, entered with the partial touch. And here there is the objective is the living entity can realize the tactile knowledge. So there is the Charma Devata, demigod Anila, and then there is purpose of the Charma, that is the living entities can realize the tactile knowledge. Text 17. Karnavasya vinirbinnau dikshnyam swam vivishurdishah Shrotreenamshena shabdasya siddhim yena prapadyate. Translation.
when the ears of the gigantic form became manifested, all the controlling deities of the directions entered into them with the hearing principles, by which all the living entities hear and take advantage of sound. Purport. The ear is the most important instrument in the body of the living entity. Sound is the most important medium for carrying the message of distant and unknown things. The perfection of all sound and knowledge enters through the ear and makes one's life perfect. The entire Vedic system of knowledge is received by oral reception only, and thus sound is the most important source of knowledge.
Then there is manifestation of Shrutram Karna, or the ears of the virāṭ-puruṣa. The controlling deity of the directions, Dikpala. They took charge of the sound, and purpose of the sound is hear and take advantage of the sound. Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, especially taking advantage of the Vedic principles and thus purify one's life. Prabhupada writes here, ears are the most important instruments in the body, and thus by the medium of the sound, one can purify one's existence. So when we are chanting Hare Krishna, we are supposed to hear. Right. So chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And by hearing, and Prabhupada also says here that the perception of all sound and knowledge is through ears, and that makes one's life perfect. Therefore, Shabda, that is, received through ears, and they are controlled by Dikpala, controller of the directions. Next is Tvacha, text 18. त्वचमस्य विनिर्भिन्नां विविशुर दीक्ष्णमौ ओषधि अंशेन रोमभि कंडु ये यैरसौ प्रतिपद्यते. Translation.
When there was a separate manifestation of skin, the controlling deities of sensation and their different parts entered into it, and thus the living entities feel itching and happiness due to touch. But the sense perception, for sense perception, there are two principles, item, touch, and itching, and both of them are controlled by the skin and hairs on the body. According to Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti, the controlling deity of touch is the air passing within the body, and the controlling deity of the hairs on the body is Aushadhya. For the skin, the object of perception is touch, and for the hairs on the body, the object of perception is itching.
The next is manifestation of Tvach, or the skin. And this is controlling deities of sensations, and they enter through this, controlling the feeling of itching and happiness due to touch. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that the sense perception has two principal items, touch and to itch. And both of them are controlled by the skin and hair of the body. And then there is a commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti where the controlling deity of the touch is different than the controlling deity of the hair. So somebody is having hair fall or something like that, they can maybe please the controlling deity of the hair, that is Oshadhya. Okay. And for the skin, there is different deity. So this is how different demigods are manifesting, and through the different parts of virāṭ-puruṣa, and the Visarga creation is going to take place. So today is the 31st December, and this is the last day of year 2024. This year was very fruitful year as such, because we reached third Canto 6th chapter. And when tomorrow we are beginning with 2025, we will begin with Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam continue. And we can take something that, we will be a little more focused and more serious in reading of our Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, study of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So thank you very much. Happy New Year to everyone. And we conclude here. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, everyone.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji and Mataji. Happy New Year to everybody.
Thank you, Prabhupada.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Project. Hare Krishna Project. God Ram Project. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much.
Prem Prakash Prabhu, Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Everyone. Hare Bol.
Jai Bol. Jai.